The olive grove. I married the wrong man on a Tuesday in June. The cathedral in Verona was filled with white roses, their scent so thick it felt like drowning. My mother wept in the front pew, believing they were tears of joy. My father walked me down the aisle with his chest puffed out, finally proud of his daughter. And I searched the faces in the crowd for one that wasn't there. Marco Benedetti. His name still catches in my throat after all these years. Even now, sitting in this cafe in Milan, watching the rain streak down the window, I can see him as he was in 1990. 20 years old, with hands rough from working his uncle's olive grove, and eyes the color of coffee beans. I was 18 when I fell in love with him. Completely. Recklessly. The way only the young can love, before life teaches them to protect themselves. We met at the festival of San Giovanni in the village of Montepulciano. My family had a summer house there, a villa perched on the hill overlooking the vineyards. We were not wealthy, not truly, but we pretended well. My father was a regional banker with ambitions beyond his station, and he had mapped out my entire life before I'd taken my first breath. Marco was carrying crates of wine from his uncle's vineyard. He bumped into me near the fountain in the piazza, and a bottle shattered at our feet. Red wine splashed across my white dress like a wound. He apologized in rapid Italian, his face flushed with embarrassment. I should have been furious. Instead, I laughed. That laugh changed everything. For 3 summers, Marco and I were inseparable. We walked through olive groves at sunset, the silver-green leaves catching the dying light. We swam in the river below the old stone bridge, our bodies tangled together in the cold water. He read me poetry, Dante, Petrarca, Leopardi, his voice low and reverent, as if the words were prayers. He had nothing. His father was dead, his mother sick with something the village doctor couldn't name. He worked the land because it was all he knew, all he had. But when he spoke of the future, his eyes would light up with such fierce determination that I believed him. He was going to study agriculture at university. He was going to revolutionize the olive oil industry. He was going to prove that a boy from the groves could become something more. I believed him because I loved him. And then I stopped believing. It happened in the summer of 1993, the summer everything changed. My father had arranged for me to meet Alessandro Ferrara, the son of a textile magnate from Milan. Alessandro was 32, handsome in a cold, marble sort of way, and worth more money than I could comprehend. My father made his expectations clear over dinner one evening, his voice casual but his eyes sharp. The Ferraras are interested in you, Juliana. This is an opportunity. I don't want an opportunity. I want to finish university. You want that farm, boy. My father set down his fork. I know about Marco. The whole village knows. You think I would let my daughter waste herself on a man who smells of manure and crushed olives? My mother said nothing. She never said anything. That night, I went to Marco. We sat in his uncle's barn, surrounded by the sweet, musty smell of hay and the distant bleating of goats. I told him about Alessandro, about my father's demands. Marco took my hands in his. His palms were calloused, warm. Run away with me, he said. We'll go to Florence. I'll find work. We'll be poor, Juliana, but we'll be together. Isn't that enough? I looked at his face, so open and earnest and full of hope. And I thought of my mother. 53 years old, with gray in her hair and resignation in her eyes, trapped in a marriage to a man who saw her as furniture. She had married for love once, too. Look where it had gotten her. I thought of the villa, the dinners, the dresses. I thought of Alessandro's family estate in Lake Como, the photographs I'd seen in magazines. I thought of spending my life in a farmhouse, scrubbing olive stains from my fingers, growing old and tired and bitter. I pulled my hands away. I can't. The light in Marco's eyes flickered. Can't or won't. Does it matter? He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. I would have given you everything, Juliana. Every single thing I had. That's the problem, Marco. I stood up, brushing hay from my skirt. Everything you have isn't enough. I walked out of that barn and didn't look back. The wedding was 9 months later. Alessandro was attentive in the way of men who collect beautiful things. I was his newest acquisition, displayed at parties and dinners, admired and then set aside when the guests went home. On our wedding night, I lay in our enormous bed in our enormous house and stared at the ceiling, feeling nothing at all. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't learn until years later, was that Marco hadn't given up. The morning after I rejected him, he left Montepulciano. He sold his portion of the family olive grove to his uncle, packed a single bag, and took a train to Rome. He enrolled in agricultural sciences at La Sapienza, working 3 jobs to pay his tuition. He slept 4 hours a night and studied the rest, driven by something that burned in his chest like a fever. I know this because I made it my mission to find out. And then I made it my mission to stop him. It started small. A whisper here, a suggestion there. Alessandro's family had connections everywhere: politics, business, academia. When I learned that Marco had applied for a prestigious research fellowship, I mentioned it casually to my father-in-law over dinner. Marco Benedetti? From Montepulciano. He raised an eyebrow. I know someone on the selection committee. Word is he's a radical. Very unprofessional. Probably not worth the risk. The fellowship went to someone else. When Marco started a small organic olive oil company in 1998, I convinced Alessandro to have one of his business associates undercut Marco's prices, flooding the market with cheaper product until Marco's venture nearly collapsed. When Marco applied for a business loan in 2001, I made sure the bank received an anonymous tip about irregularities in his financial history. The loan was denied. Each small victory felt hollow. I told myself I was protecting my family's interests, maintaining our position. But late at night, when Alessandro snored beside me and the silence of our childless house pressed down like a weight, I knew the truth. I was punishing Marco for being right. I was punishing him because I had chosen wrong, and watching him succeed would have been proof of my failure. But Marco didn't fail. Every obstacle I placed in his path, he climbed over. Every door I closed, he found a window. His organic olive oil company nearly went bankrupt 3 times, and 3 times he rebuilt it. He secured investors from Germany, from America, from Japan. He innovated when the market demanded it, held firm when lesser men would have sold. By 2005, Marco Benedetti was being featured in business magazines as the future of Italian agriculture. By 2008, his company was worth 50 million euros. I watched his rise from the prison of my marriage, and I felt something wither inside me. Alessandro and I had tried for children. We'd tried for years. Doctors were consulted, specialists flew in from Switzerland and America. Nothing worked. Alessandro blamed me, of course. He blamed me with his silence, his distance, his increasingly frequent business trips that smelled of another woman's perfume when he returned. By 2009, we were strangers sharing a house. I was 44 years old, with everything money could buy and nothing that mattered. I remember the exact moment I decided to leave. It was a Thursday evening in November. I was standing in our kitchen, a kitchen designed by a famous architect that I had never once cooked in, when I heard Alessandro on the phone in his study. Yes, the papers are ready. I'm leaving her everything she's entitled to. It's not as if she contributed anything meaningful to this marriage anyway. He was preparing for divorce. He had been preparing for months. I should have felt devastated. Instead, I felt relieved. The divorce was finalized in the spring of 2010. I received the Milan apartment, a generous settlement, and my freedom. Alessandro received his mistress, a 26-year-old event planner named Valentina, and they married within the year. I moved to a smaller place in Verona, near the cathedral where I'd made my terrible mistake. I thought I would feel lost, unmoored. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. And then, in October of that year, I received an invitation. The Benedetti Olive Oil Company was celebrating its 15th anniversary with a gala in Florence. The invitation was addressed to me personally, hand-delivered by a courier. Inside, beneath the elegant script, someone had written 3 words. Please come. M. I almost didn't go. I spent a week convincing myself it was a trap, a chance for Marco to humiliate me publicly, to parade his success before the woman who had tried to destroy him. But I went anyway. Perhaps I needed to see it with my own eyes. Perhaps I needed the punishment. The gala was held in a Renaissance palazzo overlooking the Arno. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over men in tuxedos and women in designer gowns. Waiters circulated with champagne and bruschetta topped with Benedetti olive oil, deep green and fragrant with the smell of the groves. I spotted Marco across the room immediately. He was 50 now, with silver at his temples and lines around his eyes. But he stood with the same quiet confidence I remembered, surrounded by admirers and business partners, laughing at something someone had said. A woman stood beside him, beautiful, dark-haired, with kind eyes. His wife. And near them, 5 children ranging from a teenager to a toddler, all with their father's coffee-colored eyes. My chest tightened. I turned to leave. Juliana. His voice stopped me. I turned back. Marco was walking toward me, leaving his family, his guests, his triumph, to meet me in the corner of the room. Up close, I could see the years on his face. But they were good years, worn like medals. This was a man who had lived fully, loved deeply, worked hard. You came, he said. You invited me. My voice came out smaller than I intended. I wasn't sure if it was a joke. Why would it be a joke? I looked at him, this man I had loved and betrayed and tried to destroy. The words stuck in my throat. Marco, I need to tell you something. About the fellowship in 94? The price war in 98? The loan in 2001? He smiled, but there was no cruelty in it. I know, Juliana. I've always known. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. How? Because I know you. I've always known you. He gestured toward a quiet alcove, away from the crowd. Will you walk with me? We stepped onto a balcony overlooking the river. The October air was cool, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and wood smoke. Below us, the Arno glittered with reflected light. When did you figure it out? I asked. The fellowship was the first. My professor let it slip that someone connected to the Ferrara family had raised concerns. It didn't take much to connect the dots. He leaned against the railing, looking out at the water. After that, I started paying attention. Every setback, every closed door, I asked myself, could this be Juliana? And you never confronted me? Never tried to stop me? Marco turned to face me. In the lamplight, I could see the boy he had been, buried beneath the man he had become. Do you know what kept me going all those years? When I was working 18-hour days, when the company nearly went under, when everyone told me to give up. I shook my head. You did. Your betrayal. Your cruelty. He said the words without anger, almost with tenderness. Every time you tried to knock me down, I thought, I will not let her be right about me. I will not be the failure she decided I was. Tears were streaming down my face now. I couldn't stop them. Marco, I'm so sorry. What I did was unforgivable. I was scared and shallow and stupid, and I made the worst choice of my life, and then I spent 20 years trying to justify it by destroying you. He reached out and took my hands. His palms were still calloused, still warm. Juliana. Look at me. I looked. My wife, Elena, is the love of my life. My children are my greatest joy. My company has given me purpose and meaning beyond anything I could have imagined. He squeezed my hands gently. None of it would have happened if you had said yes in that barn. I stared at him, not understanding. If you had loved me enough to run away with me, I would never have left Montepulciano. I would have stayed in that olive grove, content with a small life, because I would have had you. Your rejection forced me to become someone else. Someone better. But everything I did to sabotage you made me stronger, made me smarter, made me determined to succeed despite every obstacle. He released my hands and stepped back. You were the fire that forged me, Juliana. And I'm grateful. The word hung in the air between us, impossible and true. Grateful, I repeated. Without your betrayal, none of my happiness would have been possible. I stood there on that balcony, 54 years old, divorced, childless, alone, facing the man whose life I had tried to ruin. And he was thanking me. It was the cruelest kindness anyone had ever shown me, and the most profound gift. What do I do now? I whispered. How do I live with what I've done? Marco looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled, the same smile I had fallen in love with in the piazza all those years ago. You live, he said simply. You forgive yourself, not because you deserve it, but because carrying the weight will kill you. And then you find your own fire, Juliana. You find the thing that forces you to become someone better than you are. He glanced back through the windows at his family, his beautiful wife laughing with his eldest daughter. I should go. Elena worries when I disappear. He paused at the door. Be well, Juliana. Truly. And then he was gone, swallowed back into the light and warmth of his celebration, leaving me alone with the river and the darkness and the first fragile shoots of something I had thought was dead. Hope. I stayed in Florence for 3 days. I walked the streets I had walked with Marco as a girl, past the Duomo and the Uffizi and the Ponte Vecchio. I sat in cafes and watched families, couples, old men playing chess in the piazza. And I thought about fire. When I returned to Verona, I began to write. Not excuses, not justifications, the truth. All of it. The choices I had made and the person they had turned me into. The love I had thrown away and the hatred I had let fester in its place. I wrote for myself at first, then for anyone who might read it and recognize themselves in my failures. Then for the girl I had been at 18, standing in a barn with a good man's heart in her hands, about to crush it because she was too afraid to be poor. The memoir was published 2 years later. It was not kind to me, I made sure of that. But it was honest, and sometimes honesty is its own form of redemption. I never saw Marco again. His company continued to thrive. His children grew up. His wife posted photographs on social media that I looked at sometimes, late at night, when the old longing crept in. But the longing was different now. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about the life I might have lived, the person I might have been if I had been braver. I am 68 now. I live alone in a small apartment in Milan with windows that overlook a courtyard full of lemon trees. I teach a writing workshop at the community center on Tuesdays. I have friends, good ones, who know my story and love me anyway. And sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I think about that boy in the olive grove, with his calloused hands and his impossible dreams. I think about how wrong I was about everything. And I think about his final gift to me, those words on the balcony that broke me open and rebuilt me from the wreckage. Without your betrayal, none of my happiness would have been possible. It took me a lifetime to understand what he meant. Our failures do not have to define us. Our cruelties can become someone else's catalyst. And sometimes, the greatest redemption is learning that the worst thing you ever did led to something beautiful, just not for you. I sit by my window as the sun rises over Milan, watching the light turn the lemon leaves to gold. And for the first time in 50 years, I am at peace.